And welcome into the roundtable. I'm Bill Priestley. Today we're going to be talking about Russia-Ukraine and how this can impact you in a way that perhaps you may not be aware of at this particular moment. What we have with us is Dr. Sal Mercogliano, who joins us from Campbell University over in Bowie's Creek, North Carolina. And I know he's been running around campus today. So Sal, thanks so much for joining us.
Happy to be with you, Bill.
All right. So digging into Russia-Ukraine, this looked like there was going to be a little bit of daylight on Friday with the signing of this treaty that allowed Ukraine to push some of its grain out of Odessa and possibly try to make some money off of that. And then all of a sudden, 4 missiles come in the direction of that port city and things get thrown off kilter a little bit again. Right now, what would you say is the state of this entire conflict, especially as it relates to Ukraine's ability to make money and also be able to fund itself through economic gains?
Well, obviously, the big issue is for Ukraine to be able to get its grain out. I mean, that is the economic heart of that country. We talk a lot about military supplies coming in to Ukraine, but Ukraine faces the potential of a catastrophic economic collapse if it can't get its food exported. It has nearly 20 million tons of grain sitting in silos right now that has to get out. They're getting out about 1 to 2 million tons a month out of the southern Ukrainian ports. However, that's not going to be enough. You also have issues with potential food famine in Africa, where this food is destined to, and also in the Middle East and Asia. So it's really essential. The deal that was basically brokered by Turkey. And Turkey is a big player here for 2 reasons. Number one, Turkey gets 25% of its food from Russia and Ukraine, and they control the Turkish Straits, the exit to the Black Sea. They brokered this deal between Russia and Ukraine. But as you mentioned, Russia hurled a series of missiles into the port of Odessa. What Russia is saying, but is like, okay, the deal's not in place yet. We were targeting military vessels and military weapons in the port. Therefore, the deal is still on the table. However, it's going to put a lot of hurdles to implementing this deal.
Yeah, just looking at that from a geographic perspective and obviously an economic one, how important, I mean, is Odessa everything to Ukraine economically if they can't get their grain out?
Yeah, the deal brokers 3 ports, Odessa being the larger of the 3 that's involved right there. And, you know, what you're talking about is ships the size of 30 to 40,000 tons. Give you an idea, a railway car can hold about 100 tons of cargo. So if you're talking about a 35,000 ton bulk ship, you know, it gives you an idea how many rail cars you need to do this. And then you still need to get that grain on a ship. So ships are the only way to move this commodity in bulk out. And since February, we haven't seen any ship movements in and out of those ports along the Gulf of Odessa. And that's because of 2 reasons. One, the Ukrainians themselves have mined the waters off their ports to prevent the Russians from making an amphibious landing. Second, the Russians have imposed a blockade. They haven't admitted it yet, but there's strong indications they have laid mines in and around the area. So even though they've signed this agreement, there's hurdles to implementing the movement of grain out. Number one, you're going to have to move the ships that are stuck in the ports right now off the berths. They've been there since February. Many of them have no crews on board. It's very questionable whether or not you can get them running. Second, you're going to have to clear the mines, and clearing mines is a long, laborious process. And then third, you're going to have to find ships, crews, and most importantly of all, insurance companies to fund this, to underwrite sailing ships into a potential war zone to go load grain in the Ukrainian ports. And then finally, you need the Russians to agree not to lob missiles anymore at the ports.
Yeah, there's a lot to consider when you look at that kind of situation. I had a chance to talk with Dr. Mark Scott last Friday, and it was unfortunate, the timing of our talk, because we talked after the treaty was signed, but before the missiles came down. And so one of the things that we talked about was the overall effect of what this conflict was going to mean for the Ukrainian economy. And he brought up some very interesting points. Here are a couple of them now.
The whole emergence of supply chain resilience and supply chain planning, and making sure that one engages in risk management in your supply chain, has made a lot of companies over the past year, due first of all to the pandemic, and now secondly to this conflict, to really look at where they are sourcing from, to ensure that they are hedged in their sourcing portfolios. That is to ensure that,
No.
where are we single sourcing stuff? Where are we sole sourcing stuff? This may be the best location to purchase grain, but should we purchase 100% of grain here going forward? And to the extent companies redesign supply chains and engage in nearshoring or reshoring and in dual and multiple source strategies, that could change, right? So although the Ukraine may come back to full capacity, if as a result of hedging risk, companies employ sourcing strategies that are multi-source plans, that could shift some level of exports permanently.
So that obviously has some connection to how valuable this is for Ukraine, just in terms of the fact that we might not see even their infrastructure come back online within even 5 years, maybe 10 years.
No, and I think Mark hits on a lot of key points. What he's talking about there is diversifying your supply chain. We've seen that with China with the Belt and Road Initiative. That's the whole basis of their elements there. We saw that early in the COVID crisis when China and Australia, for example, got into a very nasty fight over COVID restrictions. And one of the things that China was able to do was find other sources of ore and grain. They went shopping on the world markets. They went to Africa. They went to South America. They able to do it. The issue I would have right now with sourcing that Mark's talking about commercial companies. The problem here we're dealing with is national economies. Nations like Somalia and these countries that are very low income that depend on Ukrainian grain really can't go shopping a lot of other places because they don't have a lot of money to do that. The other element here is just the pure supply element. Everyone thought, okay, well, Ukraine grain is going to be going down. We'll source grain from other places. Well, if you go to South America right now, you're dealing with drought on the major rivers there, which means a lot of grain isn't coming down from the interior of South America to the ports because of low water levels. There was a lot of hope that India would produce excess crop this year, but they're having a massive heat wave and they can't get crops. As a matter of fact, they've halted the export of crops because they think they need it. And in the United States, we have great yields of grain and crops, but we can't get grain exported out of the West Coast of the United States because container companies don't want to take American exports. They want empty containers to feed back into the system. So this is really a global problem. Again, what happens in one country doesn't stay in one country anymore.
Yeah, you're certainly right there. I wanted to bring up one other point that he brought up that I didn't necessarily know, and I don't think a lot of people know. And this is in the scope of our own smartphones. In fact, how this conflict is going to affect that industry there as well.
Northeast Asia, right, represents collectively the number one area in the world that is engaged in chip production, right? Semiconductor chip production. Well, those semiconductor chips are highly dependent on particular rare gases that come both from the Ukraine and Russia, right? 85% of the US's semiconductor chip production is provided by gas from the Ukraine. So we have food and energy issues, but then we have these key commodities, metals, iron ores that are significant for particular types of products we use in the Western world or in the US, right? That has a different type of impact than those that are in close geographic proximity.
That as well. He also went on to say that some of those metals include palladium, which is one of those precious metals found in catalytic converters that are being stolen day by day here in the United States, but also, iron ores, those chips that are going to be in automobiles, the ones that we are so short on here in America.
No, again, I agree with Mark all the time, except when it comes to his football choice. He's usually spot on everything. And, he is exactly right. We tend to forget that element of globalization that has taken root here since post World War II. Again, you look at Mark Levinson's, Outside the Box, where he talks about how since post World War II, we're a very integrated society. Even the iPhone that everybody thinks comes out of China doesn't come out of China. It's assembled in China from manufactured parts from around the world. And when you have a disruption in one area of the world, even the Black Sea, a cul-de-sac off the Mediterranean, it has global impacts. And because of the stress we're still under from COVID, again, from 2 years ago, and the supply chain crisis that we've seen manipulated, and everything that you all have covered here, both at sea, on land, and in the air, this means that any further disruption impacts trade. And Ukraine-Russia has a lot of variables. Again, just to look at the food situation, we're talking about the winter wheat coming out. Well, guess what? Spring wheat didn't get planted in a lot of fields. We're not going to see summer wheat going in. We're not going to see a lot of the crops that need to go in coming in. So we're going to see this kind of kaleidoscope, domino effect here of issues that are impacting us down the road. And this is the fear we have about conflicts. Again, we've kind of gotten our way out of the idea that we're going to see large world conflicts. I'm not sure why. I mean, we've had September 11th. Now we have Russia, Ukraine. We've seen these instances hit and these forms of disruptions.
Yeah, we got about a minute left here, and that's kind of where I want to end this. Does a conflict like this and showing how it affects the supply chain with disruption, does that make geopolitical unrest something people want to stay away from, knowing that they are, you're throwing a rock into a very small pond where everyone's going to be affected by it, no matter where you are in the world?
Yeah, I mean, you can't be isolationist. I mean, it doesn't exist in this modern world. I mean, the United States is very lucky in that we are self-sufficient in a lot of areas, much more than many countries are. However, a lot of countries are not. And this is the thing that we keep seeing. And remember, the root cause of conflict tends to be economic, supply chain issues. That tends to be why you see wars and conflicts happen in the first place. Yes, there's political, there's ideology, we see that too, but a lot of it comes down to pure economics. And when you start seeing shortages in supplies like we're going to see here as a result of this conflict, it's going to create instability, not just in our country, but in other areas around the world. And the fear here is that a war in the Black Sea will resonate beyond the shores of the Black Sea into other areas, and that could mean supply chain issues further down the chain as we're finally starting to get a handle on part of it.
Yeah, it's definitely, just one little thing can impact everybody. The butterfly effect is surely in pure form. Sal, thanks so much for joining us. I know you're going on vacation. I won't say where, but I know that a lot of water is going to be in your future.
I appreciate that, Bill. Aloha.
All right, see you later. Thank you very much, Sal Vercoglia. We'll take a break, and we'll take back and wrap up our show right after this.